For Dad's birthday, I went all out, sent him on a luxury vacation and handed him a check for $14,000. You'd think that might earn a thank you, but nope. He just gave me this flat smile and said, "Your sister's basically the only heir now." Then Mom chimed in, cool as ever, "We transferred everything to her. It's official." I just looked at them and said, "Grandma disagrees." That was it. 2 days later, some of their financial accounts got frozen, a few documents were suddenly revised, and guess who got the first call from their lawyer? And sitting right next to me when the call came in? Grandma, with this quiet, satisfied smile on her face. When Dad finally opened the envelope I gave him, he barely reacted. No raised eyebrows, no surprise, nothing. Just a nod, like I'd handed him a water bill instead of an all-expenses-paid stay at the banyan tree in Phuket, his dream destination, and a $14,000 check. Mom, seated beside him, gave me that pursed-lip smile I'd seen too many times. It was her go-to look whenever I managed to shine a little brighter than Ellie. "Ellie, how generous of you," she said, like my gift had somehow made her uncomfortable. Then Dad leaned back, calmly folded the envelope like it was a grocery list, and dropped the line that knocked the air out of me. "Your sister is essentially the only heir now." I froze. "What?" was all I could say. Before I could even wrap my head around it, Mom spoke again. "We signed it all over to her. Officially." I just sat there, staring at my plate, that steak dinner I'd splurged on suddenly tasting like cardboard. I had driven 4 hours just to spend the evening with them. I spent weeks putting together this surprise, worked out every dollar, dipped into my savings, because, deep down, I still hoped I mattered to them. I looked at their cold, detached expressions and quietly said, "Grandma disagrees." That's when Mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Dad's smile faltered just slightly. 2 days later, their lawyer gave me a call. "We need to talk," he said. Grandma was right beside me, sipping her tea like it was any other afternoon. She leaned over and whispered, "It's time to fix the paperwork." And then she smiled. For the first time in years, I felt something loosen in my chest. I actually smiled back. Growing up, I believed loyalty was the way you showed love. I gave them everything I had: obedience, silence, sacrifices. Ellie? She gave them gifts. That was it. That was her entire contribution to the family. And somehow, that was always enough. She was the miracle child, the one they almost lost during a complicated birth, the one whose picture got hung in the hallway 3 separate times. Meanwhile, mine lived inside a dusty old photo album stuffed in a drawer. If she cried, they gave her jewelry. If I cried, I got told to toughen up. No matter what I gave, it never seemed to count. When Dad's company was struggling during COVID, guess who wired him $10,000 just to keep things afloat? That was me. When Mom needed emergency dental work but didn't want to cut into her vacation money, she didn't even ask. But I covered that too, from my own emergency fund. They never had to spell it out. I always got the hint. A phone call, a deep sigh, a subtle guilt trip like, "Well, guess we'll cancel that trip unless a miracle comes along." And that miracle? Yeah, it was me. Every single time. While I was juggling bills and side hustles, Ellie was off, finding herself, in Bali, then Morocco, then Iceland, just hopping from one yoga retreat to the next. She hadn't held a real job in over 6 years. Her last business venture was an Etsy shop selling hand-painted rocks that lasted barely 3 months. Dad once sent her $3,000 on PayPal because, and I quote, "Starting a business is tough." And you know what? I let it happen. I kept telling myself, "You're the responsible one. They just need a little help until things smooth out." But they never did. The only thing that changed was how bold they got about taking from me. Every birthday, I tried to outdo the last. Upgraded car parts for Dad's truck, spa weekends for Mom, paid for groceries, home repairs, even their Netflix and Hulu accounts. I took care of it all. And Ellie? She'd roll in with a bottle of cheap wine and a selfie stick and get praised like she'd just ended world hunger. So this year, for Dad's birthday, I decided to make it count one last time. The resort vacation wasn't a bribe. It wasn't desperation. It was just a gift, one final act of love, no strings attached. I spent months planning it, got a great deal, even set up a private guide for their hikes and spa sessions. The $14,000? That was supposed to be a symbol, a peace offering, a way to build a bridge. Instead, it turned out to be a wrecking ball. We signed everything over to Ellie. Just like that. No heads up. No explanation. Not even a real conversation. I wasn't just left out of the will. I was completely written out. Dad didn't even glance at me when he said it. Just kept sipping his wine and chewing, like we were talking about football scores. Ellie wasn't there, of course. She didn't need to be. Her absence carried more weight than my presence ever could. Once again, she'd won without lifting a finger. I drove home that night in total silence, fists clenched on the wheel, my vision blurred with fury. But truth is, I wasn't even mad at them anymore. I was furious with myself, for all the years I'd spent trying to earn their approval with money, patience, and pretending everything was okay. I bent over backwards to be the good son. The stable one. The rock they could lean on. But something snapped inside me when I said those 3 words, "Grandma disagrees." See, what they didn't know was that their own mother had reached out to me the year before. Grandma had gotten older, but her mind was sharp, sharper than both of them combined, and she was tired of watching them treat me like a backup plan. She saw through it all. The favoritism. The constant taking. "It's not your sister," she told me once. "It's your parents. She just learned it from them." Then she said something that rattled me to my core. "I've updated my estate plan," Grandma told me. "You'll understand why soon enough." Later that same evening, after the birthday dinner disaster, I gave her a call. I explained everything, what they said, how it all went down. She didn't respond with much. Just calmly said, "I'll handle it." And sure enough, 2 days later, their accounts started locking up. Their lawyer got in touch, panicked, breathing heavy. Turns out, the family trust had some fine print they'd completely overlooked. Clauses that only Grandma had authority over. All that paperwork they had supposedly signed to hand everything over to Ellie? It never made it through. Grandma had blocked it. And the first person their lawyer reached out to was me. But because Grandma had named me executor. And that was just the start. The lawyer was tripping over his words on the phone. "There seems to be a bit of confusion," he said. Confusion? That was putting it mildly. What he meant was, "You don't run the show anymore, and it's got everyone rattled." He tried to play it off like it was a simple clerical hiccup. Just a temporary hold, routine process, nothing personal, he assured. So I asked him directly, "Who has power of attorney now?" He went dead quiet, 6 long seconds, before muttering, "Technically, your grandmother." Technically. Sure. Meanwhile, my phone was lighting up like it was prom night. 15 missed calls, 12 texts, and 1 barely whispered voice message from Mom saying, "We need to talk. It's not what you think." Not what I think. They made it crystal clear I didn't count anymore. There was no gray area in what they said. Still, they wanted to meet, in person, somewhere neutral. I told them to come to Grandma's house. The second they walked through the door, Mom already had that watery, wounded look on her face. Dad wore his usual emotionless lawyer mask, cold and calculated. Ellie strolled in behind them, sunglasses on indoors, looking like she'd just come back from another spiritual cleanse. Grandma didn't waste time. She was already seated at the head of the dining table with a neat pile of folders in front of her, like she was about to hand down a verdict. I was sitting to her right. That used to be Ellie's spot. "Let's get started," Grandma said without missing a beat. Dad cleared his throat, trying to set the tone. "I think there's been some overreach here," he began. Grandma didn't even flinch. "No," she replied, "there's been a correction." Mom jumped in quickly. "This is a family matter. The estate shouldn't be upended like this." "It is a family matter," Grandma shot back, "which is exactly why I stepped in. You tried to rewrite history and cut out the only person in this family who's actually shown up for us." Mom's face went splotchy with red. "We never excluded him," she tried. I looked her in the eye, steady and calm. "Yes, you did. You told me, directly, that Ellie was the sole heir now. You said it like I didn't even belong. After everything I've done. After all the help I gave you. You made it clear I was never meant to be part of the picture. Ellie rolled her eyes and let out a dry laugh. God, you sound like a martyr. I turned to her slowly. Ellie, I paid off your debt consolidation 3 years ago. You told me it was for hospital bills. But it was actually credit card debt from that trip to Tulum. I know because I sent the money straight to the lender. And I never said a word. She shut up. You remember when your apartment flooded and Dad claimed your landlord was screwing you over? Turns out, the place flooded because you ignored the leak. I paid for the repairs. And when you got evicted anyway, guess who covered your first and last month's rent at the new place? Ellie froze. She had nothing to say. For once. You always just assumed I'd cover you. That I'd keep quiet. Well, not anymore. That's when Grandma calmly pushed one of the folders across the table toward them. These are the new legal documents, she said. The family trust has been updated. He's now the primary beneficiary. She looked at my parents. Not Ellie. Not either of you. She continued, I also revoked that power of attorney you both tricked me into signing 2 years ago. Your so-called retirement strategy? It's been scrapped. Mom gasped, stunned. You can't just. I can, Grandma said sharply. And I already did. Your lawyer confirmed it. Dad's jaw tightened. So what happens now? You're punishing us for everything we've built. You didn't build any of it with me, Grandma replied, ice in her voice. Everything I gave you was meant for this family. And you turned it into a machine for ego and entitlement. Ellie shot to her feet. This is absurd. So he just gets everything? The house? The stocks? That's insane. I stayed calm. I'm not taking everything, Ellie. Just what I've earned. What's fair? Mom tried one last desperate move. She turned to me, her tears finally falling. We didn't mean to hurt you. We figured you'd be okay. You're the strong one. And that's exactly the problem, I said, cutting her off. You treated my love like it was endless. Like you could drain me dry and I'd still show up with gifts. Well, I'm done showing up. I'm not your backup plan anymore. That's when Dad slammed his palm down on the table. You ungrateful little. Grandma stood up. And even at 90, when she stood, everyone shut up. You will not raise your voice at him, she said firmly. Not in this house. Not again. The room went dead silent. She turned to me and gave a small, quiet smile. We're done here. Just like that, it was over. They left in a cloud of disbelief and anger. But I stayed behind. And for once in my life, I wasn't the one being dismissed. They couldn't believe it. The shock on their faces when Grandma closed that folder? Honestly, it was almost funny. Like they'd really thought they had a permanent grip on everything. Like the idea that I might finally push back had never even crossed their minds. But things didn't end at that meeting. Not even close. 3 days later, everything started unraveling. The first domino? The family lawyer. The guy who'd always seemed more loyal to Dad than to any actual ethics suddenly sent over a quiet little letter. His firm was officially withdrawing representation, citing a conflict of interest. Translation? He figured out which way the wind was blowing, and it wasn't in my parents' favor anymore. Then came the audit. See, Grandma hadn't just restructured the trust. She went all in, hired a forensic accountant. And what they found? It was bad. Turns out, some of those gifts Ellie had been showered with over the years weren't just generous handouts. They were unauthorized withdrawals from a shared family account tied to the trust. And worse, some of the documents had forged signatures, including mine. I sat there in a conference room with Grandma, 2 attorneys, and the accountant as they laid it all out, step by step. Turns out, around $87,000 had been drained through so-called emergency loans that were never disclosed. And the timeline? It lined up perfectly with Ellie's spontaneous spiritual sabbaticals, cosmetic touch-ups, and that luxury retreat she took in the Maldives for 2 months. The paperwork didn't lie. I didn't need revenge. The truth was doing the heavy lifting. By the end of that same week, the accounts my parents had been leaning on were either locked, seized, or completely restructured. That cozy retirement plan they'd been dreaming about, funded by the family trust, poof, gone. Now, They'd have to rely on their own actual savings. You know, like regular people. Dad called me once after that. Just one voicemail. "I hope you're proud of yourself," he said. Was I proud? But I was free. Ellie, on the other hand, came completely undone. She posted a whole 12-part sobfest on Instagram, crying in her car, talking about how toxic family systems try to suppress divine feminine energy. Which, coming from the same person who once told me I was too emotional because I asked her to pay me back for the laptop I bought her, was honestly hilarious. But the best part? The comments section. People started calling her out, hard, because I posted the receipts. Literally. Screenshots of the payments I'd made. Emails. Signed IOUs. No caption needed. The proof spoke loud enough. One by one, her spiritual fanbase turned on her. People started digging into her online behavior. The whole thing collapsed like a sandcastle in the tide. Was it poetic justice? Not quite. It felt bigger. It felt earned. Meanwhile, my own life didn't just improve, it bloomed. I finally moved into that place I'd been eyeing for over a year. Nothing extravagant. Just a clean, modern 2-bedroom with big windows and a patio that lit up beautifully in the morning sun. Paid in full. No mortgage. Grandma insisted on moving a portion of the trust directly into my name. "You've earned your peace," she told me. "Use it wisely." So I did. I took a real break, 2 full months off work. Traveled solo through Italy, Greece, and Croatia. No social media flexing. No curated photos. Just me, sunlight, and the kind of quiet no one could take from me. I didn't call my parents. Not once. They, of course, kept trying. Emails about how family should stick together. A couple of guilt-trippy messages from Mom asking if I could help cover some unexpected medical expenses. Even a birthday card from Dad signed, "Love always," no return address. But it was too late. 6 weeks later, Ellie made her final move. She showed up at my building, unannounced. No sunglasses this time. No makeup. Just red eyes and trembling hands. "I need help," she said. "They cut me off. Grandma won't even speak to me." I didn't yell. Didn't rub it in. I just opened the door halfway, looked her in the eye, and said, "Now you know how it feels." Then I shut the door. After that, they stopped trying. And I finally got to focus on something I'd never really had before, my own life. I launched my own consulting firm. Brought on 2 team members. In 6 months, we expanded faster than I expected. The clients came through word of mouth, people who appreciated straight answers, dependability, and real follow-through. Funny how the values that got me taken for granted ended up being the foundation of my success. One night, I was reviewing contracts at my office when a handwritten letter arrived. From Grandma. All it said was, "You did good. I'm proud of you." They thought blood meant obedience. You showed them what loyalty really looks like. Good. That night, I slept like I hadn't in years. I thought that was the end. That cutting ties, walking away, and reclaiming what was mine was the final chapter. But I've come to realize, closure isn't just silence. It's not the absence of conflict. It's understanding why the conflict existed in the first place. In the months that followed the fallout, I felt something unfamiliar. It wasn't peace, not at first. It was stillness. A strange, almost unsettling calm. Like my nervous system didn't know what to do without constant emotional chaos. No more late-night calls asking for favors. No more passive-aggressive texts that started friendly and ended with a request. No more guilt trips. No more manipulation. I was free. And still, something tugged at me. It wasn't regret. It wasn't second-guessing. It was a question. Why had I been the one holding everything together for so long? Why was I the one they dumped their chaos on, but never trusted with their respect? That thought lingered like a splinter. Until one Sunday morning, I found myself sitting at Grandma's kitchen table again, same old chipped mug in front of me, filled with the same strong, unsweetened tea. She was reading the paper. Didn't even look up. "You're thinking too much," she said without lifting her eyes. I stared into the cup. "Do you think they ever loved me?" She slowly folded the newspaper and set it down. Looked me right in the face. They loved what you gave them, she said gently. That's not the same thing. But did they ever realize what they were doing? How they used me? Grandma looked me straight in the eye and said flatly, they saw it. They just didn't care. I leaned back and let that truth soak in, heavy like a cold rain. You don't owe anyone anything just because you share blood. She went on, the people who truly love you show it by choice, not because they're obligated. I nodded slowly, and for the first time, I actually believed it. Closure didn't come all at once. It came in waves. Like the time I met up with an old friend I hadn't seen in years, someone I'd pulled away from because I was too busy being the emotional ATM for my family. We laughed like no time had passed, and then she said something that stopped me mid-sip of coffee. You seem lighter. Like you finally stepped out of someone else's shadow. I had. But I wasn't ready for what came next. It started with a message from a name I hadn't seen in over 20 years, Diana, Dad's first wife. I barely remembered her growing up. Dad never talked about her much, only to say she abandoned the family. But now here she was, reaching out on LinkedIn of all places. She said she read something about the family business online and thought I should know. You have another sibling. My heart started pounding. Another sibling? We arranged to meet at a small cafe, neutral ground. Diana was older now, but there was something familiar in her eyes. Then he walked in. Tall, about my age, with the same eyes. The same walk. His name was Mark. My half-brother. He grew up across the country, raised by Diana. No contact with Dad since he was 6. Diana hadn't left because she was cruel. She left because Dad drained her, emotionally and financially, just like he tried to do with me. Mark was her son from that marriage. When she refused to sign over her inheritance to prop up one of Dad's failed schemes, Dad cut them both off. Sound familiar? Mark had been watching my story unfold from afar, seeing Dad and Mom's financial games collapse online. He saw me become her all over again, taken for granted, then shut out. I always wondered what kind of person you'd turn out to be, Mark said. Turns out, someone way stronger than me. He slid a folder across the table. Grandma's not the only one keeping track. Inside were emails, photos, decades-old account records, proof the manipulation didn't start with me. Or with Ellie. It started long ago. Dad had been running the same con for years, playing the same game with different people, always blaming them when the well ran dry. He hadn't just tried to exploit me, he built a whole life exploiting everyone. But here's the twist. Mark had built his own life quietly. Successfully. Owns a logistics company. No debt. No drama. He didn't want revenge. He wanted justice. I think it's time to tell the full story, he said. Not just for you. For everyone he hurt. We contacted Grandma. She agreed. Together, we filed a civil lawsuit, not to destroy Dad, but to expose him. To put the truth on the record. When Dad got served, that's when his whole story fell apart. The local press picked it up, headlines screaming, well-known consultant accused of coercive financial abuse within family trust. Embarrassment. Public shame. The truth changed how people saw him. And the best part? He couldn't touch me. Not legally. Not financially. Not emotionally. I stood on the courthouse steps the day we filed, sunlight pouring down like a long-awaited victory. Grandma on one side. Mark on the other. 3 generations. 3 survivors. 3 people who had finally had enough. Sometimes justice isn't jail or public shaming. Sometimes it's knowing the person who tried to silence you no longer holds the power. Sometimes it's the quiet in your own home, the kind you've earned. Sometimes it's your phone staying silent and not missing the noise. I'm not angry anymore. Not bitter. I'm done. I owe them nothing. Not a dime. Not an apology. Not even a return call. What I built myself. What I reclaimed with truth. And what I've learned is this. Being born into a family doesn't make you theirs. Being broken by them, and still standing, that makes you your own. And that's exactly who I intend to stay. Forever.